So officially it's time to start. And tip one is give it a minute, because there's nothing more derailing than that person coming in and you think, should I start over again, or should I just keep blazing on? And there they are. Thank you for demonstrating my point. All right, thank you. So I'm Rich Bowen, and I am an open source strategist at AWS, and I'm also a board member at the Apache Software Foundation. But more to the point for this talk, I've been attending free and open source conferences since 1996. So I've attended hundreds and hundreds of conference presentations, and I've seen a lot of bad ones, and I've seen some really good ones. And I just want to share some tips with you. I don't have all the I don't have all the answers. I just have some suggestions of things I've seen done really well and things I've seen done very poorly. I don't expect this to be the best presentation you've ever attended, so please don't expect that. And I am intentionally exaggerating many of my points to make you think about how you give your presentation. So don't take this too seriously. But I want to start with a recommendation that you think about the best conference talks that you've ever attended, and think very intentionally about what you liked about them. And at the same time, the ones that you've attended that were terrible, think really consciously about what was terrible about them. So this guy, this is Damian Conway, and he is one of the top 5 presenters I've ever attended. He's a professor at Monash University in Australia, but for a brief time, he gave presentations at a lot of Perl conferences. And he is the person that I aspire to be, not to kind of mimic him, but I learned a lot from him about engaging your audience. And I still strive to that goal. Haven't seen him for about 20 years, but I'm still striving for that. This is Kathy Sierra, and this terrible picture is from, let's see, Ohio Lennox Fest, probably about 10 years ago. And this is maybe the best speaker I've ever attended. She was just super engaging. She was funny. She interacted constantly with the audience and adapted to their responses. And if you remember her name, Kathy Sierra, maybe look for some of her videos online. She's just really great. Even if you're not interested in the content she's presenting, she's incredibly engaging. This guy's Mark Jason Dominus, or MJD, who he was the first person who kind of pointed out to me how terrible my presentations were. And he did this in a very constructive way. This is him playing harmonica on stage at the Perl conference back in '97 or something. And he's one of the reasons that I have the confidence to do this, and hope that maybe you're listening and will laugh at some of my jokes, because MJD really, he gave a talk called Presentation Aikido, where he really drilled down on ways to improve your stage presence. And one more person, this is Harish Pillai. He gave a talk at FOSS Asia a couple years ago about the history of AI. And he started back in the 1940s and really sort of built the stage for where we are today. And he was super engaging. And also he did absolutely everything that was in my presentation, and he was on stage immediately before me. So, kudos to him. And then this is me back about 7 years ago when I did not have a white beard. And I care about this topic because you are the voice of open source. And when people see you on stage, that's who open source is to them. And I want you to be successful in your presentations. I want you to engage your audience. I want them to be excited about it. And I want them to leave the room fired up for what they're going to do with the information that you gave them. And I go to a lot of presentations that really kind of waste my time. And you have a very short window in which to make your point, engage your audience, and tell them something that's worthwhile. So I'm going to dive in now and give you 8 practical tips that will hopefully, if you can focus on one of them or one or two of them, they'll really up the bar on how you give your presentation. Now, for those of you that gave a presentation yesterday, I'm not criticizing you. I am not trying to call out your failings. And like I said, I am exaggerating all of my points just a little bit to make you think very intentionally about your presentation and how you can improve some aspect of it. Okay, maybe I'm making fun of a few of you, just a little, but not a lot. Tip number 1, know what your talk is about. Now, that sounds unbelievably obvious and goofy, but I can't tell you how many presentations I've gone to and then left the room wondering what they were trying to tell me. And if you don't know, I'm not going to know. And if I don't know when I leave, chances are you didn't have a clear idea of it yourself. So if someone missed your talk, what would you tell them in the elevator on the way up to the next talk your talk was about? Can you say that in the space between 2 floors? Not give the whole presentation, but what is the key takeaway? What is the call to action? What is your thesis? And there's a huge variety in talks. Some of them are educational, some of them are inspirational, some of them are supposed to be funny, some of them actually are funny. You just need to be able to explain very, very briefly what your talk's about. And I told you when I got up here my goal. My goal is to make your talk better so that you'll make open source look better. And so that's my personal interest in you learning from my presentation. Now, Albert Einstein may have said, and almost certainly didn't, that if you can't explain it simply, you probably don't understand it well enough. So really, really focus on your sales pitch, on your what your talk is about. And you're presenting some of this in your title. The people in this room read my title. A few of you may have read my abstract. But if your title doesn't catch their attention, they're not going to read your abstract. And your abstract, clickbait titles, clickbait abstracts, where you sort of tease at it and don't really tell them what's about, that can be effective. It's not usually, particularly at technical conferences, because when people come to a technical conference, they're often trying to learn one particular thing. And if you say something sort of cheesy to catch their attention, they're going to go to the other talk. They're going to be in that room over there. One of the things that they teach you in speaker training, or if you're training to be a pastor, you tell them what you're going to tell them, and then you tell them, and then you summarize by telling them what you told them. And that summary and that intro need to be brief and catchy, but they also need to be informative. Now, your title should be catchy. Now, this is actually a real book, and you should buy it. It's hilarious. He's such a great writer. And I put this up there because in most contexts, this would be a terrible title because it doesn't tell you anything about what the book is about. But on the other hand, it made you laugh. And so maybe you're going to go buy this book. And maybe Matt will give me a commission for helping him sell his book. But your title is a balancing act because it should catch the eye, but it should also tell them what they're going to learn. Your title should not be longer than your talk. If your title, so there used to be this website you've heard of, it used to be called Twitter, and I would encourage people to have a title that would fit in a tweet along with the URL of the conference and their name and the name of the conference. And if it doesn't fit within those constraints, it's too long. And that is tricky because, if you're writing an amusing piece like a modest proposal for preventing children of poor people from being blah, 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 and that's challenging. This particular work, definitely worth reading if you haven't. It's hilarious. Yeah. And you should end your talk with a call to action. For those people that dozed off during the talk or were playing Candy Crush or whatever, you want to summarize your main points at the end of the talk and remind them of that one thing. Remind them of what you want them to do when they leave the room. So I, for example, want you all to give better talks. And anything that I say between now and the end of the talk that doesn't contribute directly to that point is wasting time. So don't go off on tangents. Don't talk about irrelevancies. Just focus on your point. Know what your point is. And finally, in knowing what your point is, you should be excited about this, because if you're not, I'm not going to be. And the number of presentations that I've attended where the person at the front of the room seemed to absolutely not care about their topic. There are just so many of these talks, and they stand up there and they look depressed, and they just kind of drone through their notes, and maybe they're mumbling a little bit. And if you're not excited about your topic, I'm not going to be either. Point number 2, don't tell me your life story. Often when people give their introduction at the beginning of the talk, that goes on 5 minutes. And this is a little bit tricky, because when you are in a ethnic or gender or racial minority in a room full of bearded white men, it can be very tempting to try to establish your credentials. And I get that. And that's an important part of presentations, particularly in our culture. You look around you and that's who this room is. But I want you to remember several things. You have established your credentials by standing up here. Your talk was selected by the content committee. You wrote a good abstract. You convinced these people to sit in these chairs by reading that abstract. And much more importantly, you are actually qualified because you went through that whole process and you established those credentials to be there. And I know that is easy for me to say as the white man on the stage. I get that. But I want you to focus really hard on not telling your life story, but getting straight to the point. So when I stood up here, I told you my name and who I work for, because they're paying for me to be here. And I told you what I was going to tell you. And then I moved right into my point. So there you go. If you want to know more about me personally, I'll be here the rest of the conference, and you can come talk to me then. But that's not what I'm up on stage for. Number 3, your slides are not your presentation. You are your presentation. Giving a conference presentation it's an act. What you're seeing up here is not who I am in real life. I'm being an actor right now, and I am giving you a performance. And so my slides, for me personally, they're just cue cards. They're intended to keep your eyes up here looking at my delightful cat. And if you want to put a bunch of words on your slides, write a blog post instead and reference that at the end. But I have to be fair and honest. I told you I'm exaggerating. This is not a technical presentation, so I'm cheating a little bit here. When you're giving a technical presentation, you do sometimes have to have content on the slide that backs up your point. You might have code samples. You might have text you might have a quote that you want people to read, but you need to make sure that is relevant and important and legible. Most importantly, do not make me read your slides. And even more importantly, don't read your slides to me, right? I'm literate. I can read your blog post afterwards. And when you make people read your slides, they are not listening to you. They are reading your slides. And if you're saying the same thing that's on your slides, then you're wasting everybody's time. So definitely don't read your slides to me. And I've attended so many talks where the person stood like this and they read their slides to you, and just don't be that guy. And while we're on the topic of squinting, this is an actual slide from a presentation I attended last year. Oh, no. And not only that, it was somebody who had gone through the senior speaker certification at Amazon Web Services. So this is just embarrassing. I'm
scared for whatever that's supposed to be.
I have no idea. I have no idea. So I would even go so far as to say, don't put words on your slides. And again, I'm cheating because there are obviously situations where you want words on your slides, but your slides are not your presentation. So sometimes you'll have, so I went to this presentation, I think it was Lawrence Lessig gave a presentation where each slide was one word, and that was really compelling. I wouldn't copy him because who can copy Larry, but it's a technique that you want to be very intentional about. You don't want to just put random words on your slide because that is detracting from where you want the eyes to be. Now, if you are giving a code-based presentation and you have source code on the screen, understand that the people in the back of the room, probably the people in the front of the room, can't read that. And so you want to zoom in on specifically the piece of code that you're talking about. And maybe you do that through several transitions. You focus on individual pieces of code. But better still, give them a link where they can look at the code themselves and examine it at their leisure. And that link is in the slides, which I'll give you a link to at the end, which is, a preview of future tips. How am I doing on time? I'm doing okay. All right. Number 4, a presentation is a conversation. It is not merely me talking. It's also me looking at your faces and seeing if my jokes are landing and if Neil is trying to distract me. And so, you want to talk to people, not just talk at them. Now, this is super challenging in an era where many of us give presentations online and you can't see your audience. That's really difficult. And there's a couple of solutions to that. One is to actually do a dress run, a dress rehearsal with humans in the room. That's not always an option, but it is a really good thing to do if you do have that opportunity. Another tip that I like to do is to make specific eye contact with individuals. Maybe even pick someone in the room and talk specifically to them. This is a psychological trick because it shames that person into looking back at you. So, be intentional about that, and don't be shy about using this psychological tip. So it's a conversation. You want to encourage people to talk back to you, but be very cautious about letting anyone hijack your talk. And this, I'll come back to this at question time, but there's always some guy, and of course it's always a guy, who says, not so much a question, but a comment, and it's in 3 parts. And so, you want to make sure that you practice saying, let's take that question out into the hallway, since I have a lot of material to get through. Or if you're feeling particularly spicy, you should say, these people came here to listen to me, not to you. It's also, on the flip side of that, it's useful to have a friendly heckler planted in the audience to give you that feedback that the other audience members don't feel empowered to do. Maybe they can make a joke or two and sort of loosen up the audience. I've found that very effective in the past. Tip number 5. A little more mechanical here. Use the mic. Now, I am not a fan of podium-mounted mics because I like to wander a little bit. But I have a podium-mounted mic, so I'm going to stay right here. But when I go to a talk and the speaker is handed a mic and they say, "Oh, I don't need that, I'm loud enough," I leave. And the reason for that is that I am profoundly hard of hearing. And so if I'm in a presentation and the speaker does not use the mic, I am going to miss 2/3 of what they say. So it's not a valuable use of my time. Furthermore, this thing's being recorded, and if you're not using the mic, your audio will not be on the recording. And so you're wasting hundreds of people's time, not just the people in the seats. So use the mic. So microphones are intended to be a fixed distance from your face. When you turn away from it, it doesn't work as well. When you have a handheld mic and you hold it over here, it doesn't work at all. So what I encourage you to do is when you get to the podium 10 minutes before your talk, which you should be doing, test out the mic. See if the people in the back can hear you. Make sure that you are articulating. Talk to the AV guys. If they are putting a mic on your lapel, make sure that it is positioned so that it's actually working. Take off your lanyard because it will interfere with the mic. It will clatter against the platform and make noises that will drown out what you're saying. All right. Tip number 6, record yourself and listen to it. We all hate hearing the sound of our voice. It's just a weird human thing. We don't like hearing our voice. But you have a recording device in your pocket. Record yourself. Listen to it. You will be astonished and humiliated by your verbal tics. I know that I still have them, but I have worked for 25 years to get rid of them. I listen to myself. I feel that embarrassment, and then I work really hard to remove those verbal tics. I also record a podcast, and the cool thing about I use Audacity to record audio, and you get to the point where you can look at a track and see, oh, that's where I said It has a very distinct visual look. And I really encourage you to do that. But also take a video of yourself and become aware of your nervous tics. Become aware that you stick your hand in your pocket and you slouch and you do all these other things that are annoying because they're distracting. Be aware that you touch your face a lot or you mess with your hair, because those things are distracting and you're never going to be aware of it until you watch yourself. Practice not doing those things. When my father was in college, he took a speech class, and every time that the person giving a speech said or any other of these, they're called vocal stops or tics. Everyone in the class would yell at them. And that's a really cruel way to do this, but it stuck with him. And he never does that from stage anymore. I'm doing this right now. I play with stuff in my pockets. And so I'm very intentional about taking stuff out of my pockets, but I need to be aware of that. So anyway, all of that has to do with practice. You need to practice. You need to practice some more. Figure out if you have a teleprompter screen. I always use most of what I'm saying is on the screen here, but I try to look at you and not at that. But see where the lights are. See if the lights are going to be in your eyes. Slow down. When you say you convey uncertainty. You convey that you don't know what you're talking about, even though you do, because you're giving the presentation. But when you make a dramatic pause, you sound thoughtful. You sound intelligent. You sound like you're looking for just the right word. And of course, that's complete nonsense. But it's surprising how much it affects how the audience perceives you, and that's important. Establishing authority is an important part of being up here. I hope that you believe I know what I'm talking about, even though internally I feel like I have no idea. Another reason to slow down is that really nobody appreciates it if you rush through everything and then you say, I'm going to give you 15 minutes back. People don't appreciate that. That is robbing them of their investment. They came here to learn something, and if you rush through it, then you're kind of wasting their time. Number 7, take lots of beats. Now, in speech theory, in presentation theory, a beat is when you change the subject. And doing that visually is an important way to do that. Doing that visually, changing the slides, makes people look at you because they think they're going to miss out on a slide. They think they're going to miss out on a clever picture, maybe. So you intentionally change the beat, you intentionally change the subject on a regular basis, and that keeps people engaged. And it also gives people the opportunity to zone out a little bit, and then when they come back, they're at a fresh starting point. So this is a picture of the professor, Neil Peart, in the band Rush, and he's making a beat. And so that's my visual cue there. I try to have 1 slide per minute. That's me. That's not you. Find your own cadence. However, if you keep the same slide up there for 3 minutes, you're going to start losing people. That's just psychology. You need to frequently change the visual input. And if that means making 5 slides to make 1 point, you do that. It just keeps people looking up there. As soon as you start losing people's eyes, then make a note of that. Make a note of when people start looking away, and then rewrite your slides for the next time to take advantage of that new knowledge that you've just gained. Because a beat is not just a slide, it's also re-engaging the audience. Now, there's other ways to do a beat, and this podium-mounted mic limits that greatly. But I do recommend, stepping out in front of the screen, obscuring the screen so people can't see it. Maybe you have a chair that you put on stage. If you're on a stage, then it's useful to have a tall chair that maybe you sit on briefly or walk behind it and lean on it. And this is, again, a cheap psychological trick, but it keeps people visually engaged, and that in turn keeps them mentally engaged. Get to know your presentation tool. This is, I'm using a slide thingy here that's based on React. And it tells me not only how much time I've used and what I have left, but most importantly, it tells me how long I should spend on this slide if I want to keep my cadence. And that is a huge help for me because some of these slides I tend to ramble a little bit and other ones I rush through. But on average, I am keeping almost exactly at 1 slide per minute. And that is very helpful to me as a presenter to know that I'm not getting off topic. Number 8, a picture is worth 1,000 words, as the saying goes. The picture doesn't always necessarily have to do with what I'm talking about. Maybe it's got some sort of visual pun in it. Maybe it makes people wonder. Maybe it has nothing to do with what you're talking about, and it makes people wonder, what's the connection here? Again, it's about keeping people mentally engaged while you're conveying information. This particular photo, I just love this. This is from a conference in Montreal 7 or 8 years ago. And it always makes me laugh because I know exactly what we were talking about, and it would take me 30 minutes to explain what we were talking about, and it just makes me laugh. This is one of my best friends. And but slides should evoke an image rather than listing your points. So make your audience work a little bit for the connection. Throw in a couple non sequiturs, but then go back to the obvious image now and then to keep people thinking that maybe they do understand what you're talking about after all, hopefully. So leave time for questions. That's another important thing. So in summary, 8 points that I made. Know what your main point is in your action item. That's number 1. Don't tell me meaningless off-topic stories. That's number 2. Number 3, add value to just the slides. If somebody can look at your slides and skip your presentation, then they're going to, and maybe they should. Number 4, talk with me, not at me. Number 5, remember the deaf guy in the back of the room? That's me. I can't hear you. Use your mic. Number 6, watch yourself and figure out what you hate about what you see, and then practice not doing that. Number 7, find a way to keep my attention on stage. And number 8, fewer words, more pictures. Now, one thing that I hope you noticed as I was going through this summary is that I didn't say any of the words on the slide. And that's very intentional. Do not read your slides to me. And, you know, this slide has a lot of words on it, and I know I lost some of your attention on that, and so I'm very intentionally distracting from the slides by telling you something completely different. And maybe there was a little mental dissonance there. I hope so. And that was intentional. Oh, and tip number 9. Any of you ever watch Columbo? Oh, and another thing. Always have a bonus slide. So if you finish too early, have a couple bonus slides in the bank so that you can use up that time if you went too fast. Definitely leave time for questions unless you don't want to answer questions. And then be very intentional about using up all of your time. Now, when I went through speaker training, so one of the rituals at AWS is you have to go through speaker training, which I found a little insulting because I had been a public speaker for 30 years at that point, but I learned a lot in it. And so if your company offers speaker training, I encourage you to take advantage of it because you'll learn something. But one of the things that they tell you is very intentionally, don't leave time for questions if you don't want to answer awkward questions. So if you're giving a presentation about, I don't know, a big change in the CentOS community, for example, when I did those presentations several years ago, I never left time for questions because I didn't want the questions. That was maybe a little bit lazy, maybe a little bit cowardly, but it's also an intentional thing where you convey the information that you want to convey and then you get off stage. So that is what I've got. On your final slide, give a link to your slides. Give a link to where they can find your presentation. Tell them the best way to get in touch with you. Don't give contact information that you don't want people to use. Don't put your phone number on your slide if you don't want people to call you. That's the obvious thing. But I've given you the email address that I prefer that you use. And I've given you where my slides are. Now, a big change that I've noticed just in the last couple of years is that people are actually starting to use QR codes for meaningful things. And so I do encourage you to put a QR code that links to your slides, because that way they don't have to try to write down a URL that they can't quite read from the back of the room, but they can use a QR code for that. And then one final comment. All through my presentation, all of those photos, if they didn't have attribution on them, they're photos that I took. Don't use photos you don't have rights to, because yes, it's illegal, but also it's just rude to the creator to use things in a way that they didn't authorize. So I encourage you, if you try to go to this image-heavy kind of presentation, that you give attribution for those images. And I have left, I believe, 10 minutes for questions, which is exactly what I wanted to do. So, yes.
Hey, Rich, I know a lot of speakers end up getting stuck behind their laptop because they want to push the button.
Yeah.
Can you tell people about that cat toy in your hand?
Yeah, this is a Logitech presentation thingy. I don't know what you would call it, just a clicker. They're inexpensive, and they plug into your USB port. And they let you wander around and not have to come back to your laptop. So yes, very much recommended. A lot of conferences will provide one of these when you get to the podium. and they just they work like a mouse with two buttons. So yes.
I have a couple of comments. One of the things I like to do is to ask people at the start to hand wave to see if they know anything about the subject. That gets people an idea about if the audience is interested, informed.
Yes.
And the second thing is, last couple of times I've done business cards with the QR code and project URL on, hand out to people.
Those are good suggestions. So the first one was asking people what their knowledge is so far. So at the beginning, I did ask if whether people had given a presentation earlier in the week. The challenge with asking that is so many people will ask the existing experience level of the audience and then completely ignore it. So be sure that if you ask that question, you are prepared to take advantage of the information that you gather to tune your presentation. A lot of presentation managers give you the option to not just go left and right, as it were, but to go deeper. If people express interest in a particular topic, you can then drill down there or skip it if they don't want that. The other recommendation was to have a physical card that you hand out with links to your information. I've done that in the past. I forgot this time, but that is a really good suggestion. Yes?
I always appreciate when speakers repeat questions and comments from the audience.
Yeah. So he says to repeat questions and comments from the audience, and that's especially critical in rooms that are much larger and for the recording. I also find I mentioned earlier that I'm very hard of hearing. I often have a great deal of trouble hearing the questions from the audience in a larger room. And so repeating it makes sure that I actually understood what was being asked. Yes?
I know you don't cover this in your presentation, but do you have any tips or suggestions on the call for proposals, submission, tips that you can have with that?
Yeah, the question is tips for the call for proposals. I added some content about that, and then I took it back out because of the time limitation. I would encourage you to find someone to review it who's not terribly familiar with your content. So at my company, we have a number of groups that do that. One is actually our content services folks that run the conferences, and another is my group. My group will review specifically open source presentation titles and abstracts, and we are quite brutal. And most of us have been involved in selecting content for conferences, and we try and be extra brutal. So you have to have a little bit of a thick skin when you bring me your title and abstract, because I will tell you that it's terrible. And but I also encourage people to look at, so there's two other things. One is to look at the schedule for a similar conference and read all of the titles and all of the abstracts you can stand to read, and try and get a feeling for what that committee accepted last year. The other thing is, what was I going to say? I had a really brilliant idea, I promise you. It'll come to me. But, right. Volunteer for the selection committee of a similar conference. Now, that not only helps that conference, but it also educates you on what your colleagues are thinking so far as abstracts. So I volunteer for the content selection for reInvent for the open source track. That's the AWS annual conference, and we have like 20 slots, and we get like 700 presentations, and so you have to be really brutal with them, and it sort of gives you an idea of what's going to make it and what's not. Yes.
This room is not packed, and that's a shame. Do you have advice for the folks that aren't in this room, where you have a talk that you attend and someone reads every slide out completely verbatim like it was a script, and they are a very bad voice actor, to give them constructive feedback on something that just drove you up the wall?
Well, I think that, so the question is whether I have advice for the people that did not attend this talk. And I think that the main advice that I would offer is to attend lots of talks. Now, I've been going to open source conferences, like I said, since 1996. And so I tend to go to conferences and not attend the talks because I'm here for the conversations. But now that I'm doing a lot more public speaking, I'm very intentional about attending talks, particularly talks where I don't care about the content. And I focus on the speaker and try and figure out what it is about them that's engaging. And so I encourage people, just like when you're a writer, the best advice is to read a lot. When you're a presenter, the best advice is to attend a lot of talks. Attend talks about things you care about and things that you don't, and focus on the things that annoy you. Now, I've attended literally hundreds of talks, and so I have a really keen sense of what bugs me. So yeah, that's probably the best advice I could give. Yes?
So yeah, I think one of the other things, start small. We, at where I work, we have regular talks where people can just do little presentations, but it's
That's
5 to 10
fantastic
minutes,
advice. Yeah.
and it's just in front of the company, so it's a controlled audience.
Yeah. So the suggestion is to give small talks, to start small, to go to meetups, to go to local meetups where there's free beer, so the standards are lower. But, you know, to give presentations to your team at work who already have respect for you, to present at the unconference tomorrow, to go to lightning talks and give a presentation there. And that gives you a feeling for what your strengths are. It gives you a feeling for how the audience responds to you. And hopefully it also gives you an opportunity to watch the video of it afterwards and figure out what you hated about it. So I think I am out of time. I probably have time for one more. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming and for being a great responsive audience.